Hi, sorry about the little delay in the start. We've had a few IT issues with a couple of updates that have happened on laptops since last time. So apologies about the start there and a few issues with the screen sharing going forward. Just want to welcome you in today's workshop. So today we'll be hearing from Rachael Alexander, who will be talking through sort of managing your employees' mental health in the workplace. Just want to first of all go through the questions. So if you do have any questions, we encourage as many questions as possible. So if you do have any questions, do put them in the question section, and we'll come to those at the end. We have got time built in towards today's session to go through any questions that people may have. The other thing to just say here is this is funded by the Humber Business Growth Hub through the Grow My SME program. So if you have any questions or want any further support, please do contact the Humber Growth Hub. Details will be given at the end of how to access that. So without further ado, I will pass you on to Rachael. As I say, we've had a few technical issues today, so should just be on audio only for this session today. So Rachael, I'll pass you over now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. Once again, apologies. I've had an update to my MacBook for some reason. We were just struggling, but you know, we've sorted it now, so we can dive in. So welcome everybody. My name is Rachael Alexander. I'm a workplace mental health psychologist. What this means is my passion is helping people understand about mental health and understanding the impact of good mental health in the workplace and poor mental health in the workplace. So during the next 2 hours, I'm going to be talking to you about how you can not only manage your own mental health, but how you can manage your employees' mental health. So it is, you know, I'm aware that mental health can be quite a complex subject, but I work in a very simple way in that I like to make a very complex subject very easy and practical to understand. So by the end of these 2 hours, you will have a very practical understanding of what you can do to help your employees with their mental health and benefiting your own mental health as well. If you have any questions going forward, if I say something that you're struggling to understand, then please just put something in the chat box and we will answer the questions at the end. We will have a break in about an hour, just to sort of like give you a bit of mind space that you can pop to the toilet or, you know, make a drink, get some water if you want to. So I'll be keeping my eye on the time wise. So just give you a little bit of my background. I used to work as a trainer for a bank, so I used to travel around the country helping the organisation look after staff well-being. I have a degree in counselling psychology and I have a degree in consciousness studies as well. So it's my passion, absolute passion, to help people enjoy life and be able to live a life free from stress, tension, anxiety, etc. So let's fast forward the slides, if that's okay, and let's dive into what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to first of all give you an understanding of why should we be prioritizing mental health, and I actually call it mental wealth, because if you can help your employees or if you can help yourself prioritize your own mental health, then there's so many brilliant aspects that come from that. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to look at the roles and responsibilities regarding your employee well-being, and we're going to be, first thing we're going to look at is why should you prioritize. So, you know, the first reason is business productivity. It is simple as that. If you think about your days when you are maybe not on form and you maybe have worries or you have tension or you have stress, then you know that you are not as productive as you are on the days when everything is going right, when you feel absolutely focused on the job in hand. So there are clear academic studies that show the better the well-being in your workplace, the higher the productivity. So that is the main reason. The financial benefits are huge alone. The second reason is the job role. As a manager or as a leader or as an organisational chief exec, you should have the confidence and knowledge to manage mental health and to realize that mental health matters. So what we're going to look at today is recognizing basic signs and symptoms of mental ill health, know when and how to intervene, and importantly, know what additional support is available for you and the employee, because you need support as well. And within all that becomes the empowerment aspect, that your role is to equip your staff to have the knowledge, tools, and confidence to look after their own mental health. So one of the things I'm going to be talking about, guys, is what is your responsibility when it comes to your employees' mental health, and what is their own responsibility when it comes to mental health. So I'm going to be showing you the difference, because there is a difference. And at the end of the day, because it is just the right thing to do, helping employees manage mental health and being responsible for your employees' mental health is just the right thing to do. A poll done by ACAS showed that 73% of employees think it is a manager's role to recognise and address stress and anxiety in the workplace. And, don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do that. So if we move on to the next slide, please. And, I'm a great believer when I do my webinars, when I present my webinars, that even if you just take one thing away from it, then please let this be the one thing, that your workforce is your greatest asset. So, you probably have no worries about servicing your car. When it needs servicing, a red light comes on to tell you it needs servicing, and you probably make it a priority to go and service your car, because you want it to be adequate. You want it to be fit for purpose. You want to be able to rely on it. And with our staff's well-being, it's no difference. There's no difference in that. So this is about helping our staff to stay in optimum condition so that they can complete the task in hand. They are fit for purpose. So mental wealth is ensuring good mental health in the workplace, to ensure that our staff are fit for purpose, so they are able to perform the jobs and the tasks in hand that we have assigned to them. So, take that as one of the key points from today's webinar. And again, you are your greatest asset as well. So if you are not focusing on your own mental health, then every other aspect of your life will not be as functioning as well as it can be. So if we move on, please. So when I talk to organisations about mental health, I can feel this sense of fear coming up. And unfortunately, we have been conditioned in today's society to be quite scared of mental health. We only really hear about the bad stories about mental health, people that have had severe mental health problems and have gone out, if you like, and done quite horrific acts, if you like. So there is a reason why companies are quite scared of not looking at the mental health, and it's often because they're very fearful about opening a can of worms. So if I go down that rabbit hole of talking about mental health to my employees, what am I going to find at the bottom of that rabbit hole? What is going to come up that I then have to sort out and look at? And hopefully, guys, by the end of this webinar, you will feel reassured that it's not as scary as what you may think it is. So it's about demystifying mental health, really. And what you'll hopefully realise is that there are real benefits about talking about mental health, especially in today's times of what's going on with the virus. A lot of people are, a lot more aware now of their mental health. So it is a great time to be able to be talking to your employees about their mental health and showing that you are putting it as a priority. So let's go on and look at what are the benefits of looking at mental health. So how poor mental health affects business productivity. And this was a research done by the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development about 3 or 4 years ago. And they actually found out that if staff have poor mental health, this is what happens. They have difficulty in concentrating. It takes them longer to do tasks, difficulty in making decisions or juggling a number of tasks because the brain just won't prioritize. It's just not able to prioritize. It gets overwhelmed very easily. It cannot think straight, which means we can be less patient with customers and clients, obviously affecting customer service. Staff put off challenging work when they have poor mental health, and they're more likely to get into conflict with others. So if you just take a moment, and if we say, okay, well, on average, 1 in 3 people have poor mental health, whether it's diagnosed or not, that means 1/3 of your workforce are not working up to speed. They are losing, time, energy, focus, and the job is not getting done. So even by this very quick slide, we can see that by not prioritizing poor mental health and having staff with poor mental health, our business is being affected. Next slide, please. So what is mental health anyway? And this is the first part of the demystifying mental health. Because if you say to somebody, poor mental health, what tends to happen is people can probably say, yes, that's anxiety, that's depression, that's schizophrenia, and they can tell you, what they think that's what the understanding is of poor mental health, but that's not actually the case. So let's just have a look in a very simple way. If we have poor mental health, it means that the way that we are thinking, feeling, and behaving means that we struggle to think logically. We struggle to make decisions, and we are unable to focus on tasks. So I know that when I'm feeling stressed, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, that is me. I'm unable to think logically. I can't make a decision, and I just can't focus on anything. If we have a workforce like that, that's when we get the low engagement and the high presenteeism, which means staff are not focusing on the job in hand. So if we have a workforce in this position, they are failing to be a revenue generating asset because they're just not productive. That's how simple it becomes. So let's look at the other end of the scale, good mental health. This is quite simply, we can think logically, we can stay focused, we're motivated to achieve tasks, which means we have high engagement and low presenteeism. And that means that employees are committing to the job 100%, and therefore they become a revenue generating asset. And that's how simple it is. So let's have a look at that on a scale. If we go to the next slide. So this is how simple it is. If we have poor mental health at one end of the scale and we have good mental health at the other end of the scale. And what you can see by this slide is that it says our mental health is affected by a range of factors called life. So when we are feeling overburdened, when we are feeling as though there's a lot of things going on in our life that we are struggling to cope with, whether it be financial challenges, whether it be relationship challenges, whether it be issues with our family, it might be illness. When we have a lot of things going on in our life, we can feel overburdened, we can feel we have too many responsibilities, and that's when our mental health will start to struggle. So sometimes we can have weeks of having, say, good mental health, and then all of a sudden the pressures and the responsibilities start to build up, and we will slide down to having poor mental health. Now, when we start sliding down that scale to poor mental health, we've been conditioned to think by society that we maybe need to go to the doctors because we're not sleeping, or we're feeling irritable, or we're feeling panicky. And so what the doctors will do, because they're trained to do that, is they will give us a tablet to take those feelings away. But of course, it's not taking the issues away that is causing us to feel anxious, depressed, stressed. All that the medication is doing is just taking away the feeling, but the issues are still there. So when I have people come to me in private practice, one of the questions I ask is, are you on any antidepressants? And they'll tell me usually that they are, and I want to know, what point did you go on those antidepressants, and why did you go on those antidepressants? And there's always a story around why they went on antidepressants. Oh, my marriage was not very good. Oh, I was being really busy at work. My child got poorly, and I just felt I couldn't cope. So we all have different coping mechanisms. When I was feeling very burdened, when I was in an abusive marriage, I didn't go to the doctors to cope with my mental health via a tablet. I used alcohol to cope with my mental health, because the alcohol just seemed to take away that pain. It just seemed to numb that pain a little bit. of course, I realised that this was not an effective coping mechanism, and so I took myself off and learned ways to deal with what was causing me to feel overwhelmed, what was causing me to feel burdened, what was causing me to feel stressed. And so I went into counselling, and I could see it was life. I could see it was my relationships. So poor mental health just doesn't suddenly, 9 times out of 10, just come into our lap and we wake up with it. It is a very slow build up, and then what happens is we get to the point where our body says, I am not putting up with this anymore. You have got to sort out your life and do something about it. And that's why one of my brands is called Anxiety Rebranded, because what I'm saying is your anxiety is giving you a heads up that something in your life is not suiting you and you need to look at this. So we have workplaces full of employees that will be somewhere on this scale, and if we can help our employees move up to the good mental health, then the job, their roles, their responsibilities, they're fulfilling them and the tasks are getting completed. So let's move the slide on, please. So yes, I want to give you a couple of examples now, and I want you to think about these maybe employees that you could have in your organisation. And I want you to be thinking about how productive are these employees likely to be. So let's look at Angela first of all. If we move on and we look at Angela. So Angela is 46 years old and she's an only child. She has 3 children aged 5, 10 and 15. She recently found some weed in her eldest son's rucksack and approached him to talk about it. But the conversation resulted in an argument and they are now not speaking to each other. Her 5-year-old has started with night tremors and climbs into her parents' bed frequently. Angela recently attended a parents' evening and the teacher expressed concern regarding her 10-year-old daughter's hostile attitude. Angela's overtime has also been stopped at work, which is affecting payment of household bills. Her mother has just started with signs of dementia, and her father, who has always suffered with depression, is struggling to cope looking after his wife. Angela also thinks she's starting with a menopause as she's having hot flushes and feels lethargic. So as we can see, if Angela is employed full-time in your organisation, the amount of responsibility that she has at the moment to sort out all these issues that are going on will be weighing on her mind. So, how does she get to the school to have a conversation with the teacher about the 10-year-old if she's working full time? She's going to be tired because her child is going into her bed and that's going to be upsetting her night's sleep. She's going to be worried about her 15-year-old on weed. Her mind will be telling her, oh my gosh, where is this going with him being on weed? What's going to happen in the future? She's an only child, so she's got the responsibility of dealing with her mother and her father. And clearly there's physical symptoms going on because she's feeling lethargic and she's having hot flushes due to the menopause. So this is a classic example where Angela could start to feel stress, she could start to feel anxious, start to slip into depression. She goes to the doctor says, oh yes, it sounds as though you've got anxiety, let me give you a tablet. But hopefully what you're understanding is that the issues that are causing her the stress are not being looked at. She's still not got the time to go and sort all these things out because she's working full time. So as an employer, if we can be understanding of what Angela's got on her plate and we can give her some support in helping her deal with what's going on out of work, that's then going to help her be more engaged while she's at work. So let's look at David now. So David is 32 years old and has been married for 5 years. He and his partner have no children currently and have been trying to adopt for the last 2 years, but the process is taking time. His partner has recently obtained promotion at work, which has increased responsibilities, meaning his partner is more withdrawn and irritable than usual, causing challenges in the relationship. David's parents divorced when he was 12 years old and he witnessed domestic violence. His best friend from university recently committed suicide, which was a real shock as he didn't know she was feeling this way. To help him cope with his grief, David has been drinking more red wine than usual. He's thinking of going to the doctors to get some antidepressants as he's feeling helpless and lost. So again, if we just apply our humanness to this example and apply some empathy and some compassion and think, wow, gosh, what he's got going on there? He must be feeling in a bad way. He's using a coping mechanism of alcohol. He's thinking of going and getting some antidepressants. But is that going to help his relationship? Is that going to let his grief out of what he's experiencing from his best friend's death? Is that going to make his home life better? So, you might be sitting there listening to this thinking, well, that's not really my business as a manager or as a company owner. But, yes, it is, because if you can help David sort out what's going on in his home life, and I'm going to show how you can do that, then what that means is not only is he going to have loyalty to you as a company and as a manager, but it's going to give him the skills and it's going to give him the emotional freedom to then really focus on what's going on at work. So let's move on the slide, please. So how stressed will these employees be feeling? Well, we've talked about it, pretty high. How likely is it that these employees can focus on their work 100%? Not very. And what would be the financial benefits of supporting these employees? You're going to have them fit for purpose, because at the moment they're probably not fit for purpose because they haven't got the mental or cognitive capacity to be able to be fit for purpose. Let's move the slide on, please. Thank you. So what we're talking about with mental health is we are educating employees to handle challenges, which means whatever happens, they don't get overwhelmed and they stay focused on their tasks, as well as improving, morale, engagement, teamwork. It fits so lovely into that engaged employees if we can help our employees manage the pressures and the responsibilities of what's going on in their home life. And remember, we've not even touched on what might be going on at work for them. That's just the home life we've looked at. We've not looked at the pressures and the responsibilities that work may be giving them. And we'll look at that later on in the presentation. Move the slide on, please. So how do we recognize poor mental health? So if you go online, there's, lots of lists. Mind.org does a really good list. It splits it into physical, mental and emotional, but due to the length of this webinar, I'm just going to keep it quite simple. So clearly there's absence, negativity, unmotivated. A lot of, managers, leaders see this as a bad sign when staff are negative and unmotivated, but what it tells me is something's going on for them and I need to find out what is it that's going on for them, why they're negative, why they're unmotivated. So you may have a staff member who I've got this at the moment. I've had a client referred to me from a blue light organisation, and the person who's referred them has realised that this employee is not the person that they used to be, because they used to be full of energy and full of get up and go, and they've seen them become withdrawn, they've seen them become quieter, they've seen them retreat into themselves. So it's like, what's going on for this person? Let's unpack it and let's find out. Changes in productivity. You might have a staff member that's been really productive and then all of a sudden, that productivity is being affected. Mood changes, so coming to tears easily, snapping at people, losing temper, or simply withdrawn. They've withdrawn into themselves. They've gone insular, not going, on nights out, not participating in maybe online webinars that are going on at the moment. So tiredness, upset, tears, losing temper easily, looking harassed, withdrawn, so they've withdrawn into themselves. You might hear them saying things like, oh, it was Monday night last night and I had to, crack some beers open, or I had to I ended up drinking too much. Using responses such as, I'm fine. When I run these webinars face-to-face in organisations pre-COVID, a lot of respondents on the webinar on the course would say to me, I ask my staff, what's the matter, or how can I help? And they just come back with, I'm fine. So what do I do? And I'm going to address that later on in the webinar. I'm going to give you a template of how to get around that. Struggling to make decisions or problems with colleagues. So hopefully you might be sat there thinking, oh yeah, I've got a staff member like that, and I just thought, they were being negative, but there might be something so much more going on for them. And this this webinar will give you a way to be able to dig down and go down that rabbit hole in a safe way. So move on, please, Peter. So let's look at the different responsibilities. As I said at the start, it's very clear that there are two responsibilities in this. You know, what you've got to remember, guys, is as managers, as supervisors, as leaders, as chief execs, you are not trained in understanding mental health. You're not trained in putting resources in or using therapeutic interventions to help them, you know, get better. You're not there to diagnose, oh, I think this person's got anxiety, I think this person's got depression. That's not what it's about. What your role is, let's start with the manager's responsibility. What your role is to create a safe space to open up the conversation and to open up the dialogue around it. You are not God. It is not your job to fix this. So if you have Angela in your workplace, it's not for you to sit there and think, right, we need to get her to make an appointment with the teacher so she can discuss the 10-year-old. We need to get her to go to the doctors with the 5-year-old to see about the night tremors. Right, what can we do? We can get the parent into a home. That's not your job. That's not your responsibility. So your responsibility is discussing mental health, and I'm going to give you a way that you can do that quite nicely, quite easily. Looking at the workload of that person, we're going to look at later on, can I make any reasonable adjustments for this person? And we're going to talk about that later on. Offering support, you can see there it doesn't say offering solutions, it says offering support. And often, you know, the reason why I get so many recommendations is because people just feel that I'm on their team, I'm on their side, because I'm saying, look, tell me about it. Let's work through this together. Let's look at what you can do to take responsibility to solve these issues that are putting pressure on you. It's about being flexible in the way that you are offering support and in the way that you can offer adjustments. It's about signposting, and at the end of the webinar, I'll give you places where you can signpost staff too. Most importantly, it's about following up. So you're going to open this space to discuss mental health. We're going to come up with some actions that maybe you can do on the workload side of things, what the staff member's going to do on their side of things, and then you're going to set a date for following it up and reviewing it. And most importantly as well, for me, it's about being comfortable with emotion. So a lot of us have grown up and we struggle with being with somebody that's crying. We struggle with somebody that's with somebody that's getting angry or that's withdrawn into themselves or that won't talk. So part of your role is realizing that you just have to become comfortable with that. When I worked for the bank and I used to cover about 30 branches nationwide, and when I was talking to the managers, the branch managers about staff, you know, the managers that would have challenges with the female staff, and the female staff member may start crying when they started asking, what's going on for you? You could tell that the managers were really struggling with the fact that the female member of staff was starting to cry. They didn't feel comfortable, especially if they were a male manager. They felt uncomfortable being in that space, talking to a staff member while she was crying. And it was like, no, you've got to become comfortable with that, because crying is a human emotion that we can all do. So it's, you know, maybe it's about just having a check-in with yourself and saying, actually, what am I fearful about when it comes to talking about mental health with my staff? So I'm going to go into those in more detail as we go through the webinar. Okay, so employee responsibility. So it is their responsibility to look at their home life and look at what may be causing them challenges which may be affecting their work. So if we look at Angela and David, clearly there are challenges there that they need to look at so that the challenges and pressures reduce, so that when they come into work, they've got the mental capacity to be able to deal with the pressures that work are put in, you know, that we get put on at work. It's just natural that's what happens at work. It is responsibility. So their responsibility is to face the personal issues, it's to look at the home life, it's also to take care of their own well-being, you know, their physical well-being, their mental well-being, their emotional well-being, even their spiritual well-being. Are they taking care of themselves? And a lot of workplaces now are you know, helping staff members, they might have a physical activity, you know, they might bring in a yoga teacher at lunchtime to help them deal with you know, how they're feeling. Yeah, as we can see from Angela and David, they could probably do as much yoga as they wanted in the lunchtime, but unless they look at the issues that are causing them to feel overburdened, stressed, then they are, you know, the amount of yoga would benefit, but it's not going to actually tackle the issues that are causing them to feel stressed. The employee responsibility is that they've got to be open to receiving help, and sometimes maybe professional support. And the template that I'm going to give you later of how to have a mental health conversation will help you pass that responsibility over to the employee. Because you may have some employees that don't want to look at what's going on in their home life. Yet if you can show that you've supported the employee and recommended places that they can go to look at it, but they're still choosing not to, and their work is still being affected, then at least you've shown that, you know, you've followed your duty of care as a manager, and you've tried to help them alleviate their stress, but they're choosing not to, which is a different issue altogether. And their responsibility is about being open to you, being honest with you, and listening to you. And again, I've got ways later on of how we can facilitate that process. So I'm going to go into the manager's responsibility a bit later on, but hopefully this has given you an understanding that you're not a counsellor, you know, you're not God, it's not there for you to fix their mental health challenges. It's just for you to open up the space and be able to help them explore it. Okay, if we look at the next slide. So what causes mental health issues to deteriorate at work? And again, this was another study done by CIPD. And we could see that in 2016, so that was 4 years ago, 50% of poor employee mental health is caused by a combination of issues at work and home. So let's have a look at the work issues. And I just want you to do a bit of a self-audit here, looking at the questions that we have here and looking at your workplace and thinking, okay, do we have that going on at the moment? And please remember, one of my favorite sayings is perception is reality. So your perception might be, as a manager, as a leader, as a company owner, that you don't have this stuff going on, but their perception might be different. And the only way we can understand another's perception is to ask them the question. Is this going on for you? Do you have the perception that these things are going on? And that's why, you know, questionnaires are so good in workplaces. That's why sitting and having one-to-one reviews are so good. That's why sitting and having mental health conversations is going to be so good. So, do you have people working long hours and not taking breaks? Now, as a company, of course, you're not hopefully going to be insisting on that, but you might have staff in your workplace that have some what's called martyrdom challenges going on, which means they get a lot of their identity met from working long hours and not taking breaks. So we all know the people that say, oh, I've had a really tough week this week, I've worked 60 hours. My sister used to say that a lot, and I used to say, well, more fool you, because you're only being paid for 35 or whatever. So what's going on? Why do you think you need to work all these extra hours? You may have unrealistic expectations and deadlines. You may have the opposite. You may have no expectations and no deadlines. So as a company, we do need a nice balance. We need to know, I'm making a difference in this company, so what do you expect of me? It shocks me when I go into organizations and there's no sort of like objective set for the individual, or there's no performance review set. I'm like, how do your staff know they are making a difference when you're not measuring their performance and you're not giving them great feedback and you're not encouraging their personal or professional growth? What? No wonder they're demotivated. You may have a high pressure environment, or like I've just said, the lack of meaning and purpose. So if you ask your employees, do you know how you contribute to our overall aims and goals? If they don't know, then they're probably going to feel pointless. They're probably going to feel helpless. They're probably going to think, well, no, I don't, so I don't have any meaning. Have a look at your workloads. Are they unmanageable? Have a look at how much control you give them over their own work. You know, is there a lot of micromanagement? Is there a lot of dictatorship, or is there autonomy going on in the workplace? How are relationships in the workplace? They do say that people don't leave companies, people leave their manager. So again, it's about looking at, you know, how, if I'm sitting high up in the organization, I may have the person below me telling me that yes, they really get on with the team and, you know, it's a great working relationship, but do we go and check that in? Are we doing 360 feedback? Are we sort of like going and finding out for ourselves, is what my manager telling me actually accurate? Is there an unsupportive workplace culture, or is there a lack of management support? When I go in and do my work in organisations, I always start at the top. I always start at the board level, and I always say, if you guys are not buying into this, don't bother wasting the money paying me, because you guys have to be pushing this. Job insecurity, is that a challenge, especially at times of now? You know, a lot of people fearful about redundancy. Is it high risk roles, you know, police, fire brigade, social workers, etc.? How you know, how vulnerable and how challenging and overwhelming is the role? Learn working, of course, that's very pertinent now with what's going on. So are we checking in with these people? And what are our clients and customers like? You know, if they're demanding, then that's going to put stress and responsibility. So please, even if you just take a screenshot of this slide, or please ask for the slides afterwards, and, you know, have a conversation with your peers in the workplace and say, you know, let's rate ourselves on this on a score of 1 to 5. Where are we on this? And how do we know? That's our perception. How do we know what our staff are saying? Let's move on, please. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to look at a very simple 4-step process of how you can start to have the conversation of mental health and how you can monitor this and review this. So there's a lot of great information in this. So again, please, you know, ask for a copy of the slides to Humber Business Growth Hub, and, you know, use the information that I'm sharing. You've got over 20 years worth of my experience in this 2-hour webinar. So, you know, please trust that even though it seems very simple, it is powerful. So let's first of all have a look at how do we create an awareness of mental health. Can move, thank you. So as we can see there, I picked the image there because as soon as you start to mention mental health, it is like an elephant in the room. And I always talk about this idea that in a lot of households, we have this magic rug. And what we do is we might have an argument with somebody in our household. And what we do is we, if you like, brush that argument under this magic rug, hoping that we don't have to talk about it again, or we don't have to see it again. We don't have to face it again. So I very much grew up like that. I'm 47. I very much grew up like that, in that, you know, my parents would have these arguments that would sort of like go on for about 3 days. And then that's it. It would never get discussed. The sulking would stop, and that's it. It would never get discussed again. Yet then the same argument would come about, you know, another month later or something like that. So this magic rug doesn't actually take away the issues. It just covers them for a little while, but actually it's not very magic at all, because it doesn't take away the issues that are causing the problems in the person's mind or in the person's life. So it's the same in the workplace. We might think that we're helping with mental health, but in reality, are we really? So we might have, you know, a couple of lines in the HR policy that talks about mental health, but have we really actively bought into this? Have we made it a priority? Are we really talking about it? So this 4-step process is going to give you some very basic but powerful ideas on how to do that. So the first thing is, look at and question, do you have a mental health policy? And I mean a separate mental health policy that actually gives it focus, gives mental health focus. What is mental health? What does that look like? How do we know if we're performing well as an organisation with our employees' mental health? How does that mental health policy fit into all your other policies? Absence, sickness, recognition. How does it fit into it? Every company should have a mental health policy, because what you're saying is we value our staff so much, we're going to focus on it because we know they are our assets. And not only is it going to help you financially, but it's going to help the staff members mentally. So from my point of view, it's a win-win. So we create awareness by having team chats. And that is as simple as just saying, hey guys, we're going to talk about mental health. What does mental health mean to you? When I say mental health, what does that bring up? What do you think about mental health? And if I said to you, okay, well, if I said physical health to you, you would probably be quite clear in that physical health can either be, good, I'm physically fit, I'm okay, or oh, my physical health is not so good, I've got a bad back, or I've got aches and pains or whatever. So we can sort of like position physical health okay in our world, but when it comes to mental health, it's like this big fuzzy sort of like grey cloud that we're like, not really sure what that's about. So it is as simple as about just raising awareness. And what is mental health to you, Sarah? What is mental health to you, Tom? As a company, what do you think we should be doing to help mental health within this organisation? Also, having one-to-one chats. So, when you're having your performance reviews with your staff, which hopefully you're having once a month, check in with them about their mental health. And again, I'm going to give you a template later on to enable you to do this. So basically what you're just saying is, right, let's just ask about mental health. And you're probably doing this already, in that on a Monday morning, you might be saying, how was everybody's weekend? And, some people might say, oh gosh, I had a terrible argument with my 18-year-old son or whatever, or he went out drinking and he didn't come in late till, early morning and I was worried sick. Bang, you've just talked about mental health. You've just realized what's going on for them in their mind, which is what the mental health is. So one-to-one chats, team chats. You might want to introduce awareness days such as Mental Health Monday. It's a little bit corny, but that's how simple it is. Because what you're doing is you're saying, we're going to talk about mental health, whether you like it or not, because it's important to us as an organisation. You may have notice boards that you could put up posters. So, there's so many great resources out there. Mind is just one of them that you can download, free posters and put them on your notice board. But please just don't put them on thinking, tick, we've covered that box about mental health, because your employees are savvy and they'll know that it's not really, you're just ticking a box. So, make sure that your intention behind anything is real. You may have newsletters that you can share about mental health in, you may have emails. And what I would say is delegate this. There will be somebody in your organisation who is passionate about mental health that might want to lead on this. So, it could be that you set it up as a project for them, or you set up a forum to start exploring this. You ask for volunteers who are passionate about mental health to set up a little community to look at how can we improve mental health in our workplace. You might want to look at charity events, or organising a charity event to raise an awareness. And also, it can be as simple as just literally a temperature check. So if you remember that slide which we had earlier, which had the line on it, and it said poor mental health at one end and good mental health at the other. It's as simple as just getting a piece of flip chart paper, I'm very old school in that sense, and just replicating that. And in your team, just get people to come up with a post-it note with their name on it and say, right, where are you on this line at the moment? I need to be aware of where you are so that I can support where need be. So it can be as simple as just literally a poster in your office, or talking about hashtag mental health today or whatever. So if we can move on, please, Peter. And it's very much about removing the stigma. I'm working with somebody at the moment on a personal level, and her organisation is quite fearful that she's come to me with stress. And so there's a lot of fear around that of like, gosh, if we say that you're off with stress, what message is that giving? But thankfully, she's very aware, and she's very aware that if she's struggling with this, then how many other people are struggling with this? Therefore, she needs to, you know, be a beacon of light and say, this is real, this is what's going on, I'm feeling vulnerable, I've gone and got some help, and that's how serious we need to take it. So she will go back into the organisation, she's very senior, and lead from above and say, right, I don't want any of you guys feeling how stressed and panicky I've felt over the last year or so. So this is what we're going to do to make sure that you don't feel like this. So it's about having the courage to share your own story. And that's why when I'm facilitating workshops, I will share my own stories, because I don't want people thinking, gosh, there she is, she's got all her life sorted, you know, she's absolutely positive every day. It's not about that. It's about saying, I go and check in with a counsellor from time to time. I have coaching from time to time. I have energy healing from time to time, because I need it to keep my mental health, you know, at that end of good. I take rest days. I will have weeks off because I need it to keep myself strong. So it's about leading from above. It's about sharing your own stories, and it's about that being vulnerable. It's about being okay. You know, unfortunately, we're in a society that thinks that if you admit to having, you know, stress or mental health challenges, that you're weak. And that is so far the opposite. You know, one of my other favorite quotes is, you know, mental health is when you've been too strong for too long, because we all seem to put these sort of like, you know, bulletproof vests on and go, it's fine, I can deal with everything, I'm okay. Meanwhile, the stress keeps building and building and building until the body says, no, I'm not having you feeling this stress, this uncomfortable, this irritable. And then all of a sudden we say, oh, I just started with anxiety. No, you didn't just start with anxiety. That's been building up for a long time. And all of a sudden it's just tipped over the edge and the body's saying, too much, too much, too much. We need to make sure you stop. And that's what often panic attacks are about. So it's about being transparent if you're leading on this. It's about taking it seriously. And when I go into organisations to work to deliver this type of training and policy review, if I feel that the company is not taking it seriously enough, or they're just trying to tick a box for health and safety executive, then I won't work with them, because they're wasting the money and they're wasting my time. So I won't work with them. So it's about, you know, if you're going to do it, take it seriously. So don't just think, right, I'm going to ask my staff how the mental health is and then not bother asking them again, because you'll just undo the great question that you asked in the beginning. So it's about introducing a mental health policy and looking at what does that look like in our organisation, and sharing that information with everybody and sticking to it. And it even goes down to the recruitment and training as well, about, you know, when we're recruiting, are we being honest and open that we are an employer that takes mental health seriously? When we're training people, are we training them about how to deal with stress and burnout? And if you've got a problem, you know, this is who you go see, about your emotional and mental well-being. And are we giving them training? You know, I go into organisations and I deliver training to staff about how to manage your own mental health. So I will teach staff how to manage their mental health so that they understand what they need to do. So it's definitely about removing the stigma and having the courage to remove the stigma, and not being scared of talking about mental health. Okay, we'll just do another slide or so before we have a break. Well, actually, that's a really good point to have a break now. So if I just look at my phone, right, so it's 5 to 3. So if I say, if we come back at 3 o'clock, guys, gives you 5 minutes, sort of like bob the kettle on or whatever. So please, if you've got any questions so far, please put them in the chat box, and it's a good time now for me to have a look. And if not, I'll see you back at 3 o'clock. Thank you. So welcome back, everybody. Let's continue. So we're just going to start step 2 in the 4-step process about managing mental health in the workplace. And I quite like this little image on here. If it's a physical challenge that we're having, it's quite easy to see. But of course, if it's a mental health challenge, then it is more difficult to see. But ironically, we do get symptoms, which are all the symptoms that I talked about in the first half of the webinar. The feeling upset, displaying crying, being negative, being unmotivated, withdrawn, fatigue, getting irritable easier. So I'm sure you can all, see in yourself when you are at that poor end of mental health, and you can have an understanding of when you're operating in good mental health. And it's about learning to manage that and look at what gives me good mental health, what gives me poor mental health. And we talk about that a lot more on the other webinar that I offer about managing your own mental health. So this is why, as it says on that slide, don't be afraid to talk about mental health. And we're going to go into that in a lot more detail in the next few slides. So if we move on, please, Peter. So how do I talk about mental health? And as I said before, please don't think that you have to be an expert. You are going to use the skills that you have already as a manager, as a leader, as a chief exec, supervisor, etc. And those skills are the human skills, if you like: common sense, empathy, being approachable, listening, caring, just being bothered about somebody. Just imagine that it's sort of like, your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew. It's just being bothered about somebody. Reassure your staff member that you are there to help and be part of the solution. You are not there to solve the problems. You are not the solution. A lot of people think that if you go and see a counsellor or a coach, they are going to tell you the answers to your challenges. That is not what we're here to do. We are here to just provide a safe space to allow the person to explore the thoughts and help them realise what's causing them to feel stressed and overwhelmed. You are exactly the same. It is not about diagnosing or finding a cause. The mental health first aid is an excellent course because it gives you some understanding of what individuals may be going through. But my understanding is from that course is that it is not training you to diagnose. I wouldn't diagnose, even with 2 degrees. I'm not a medical practitioner. I would not diagnose whether somebody's got anxiety or depression or whatever. What I am trained in is being able to help recognize what is causing them stress, which then is causing the physical symptoms, which the medical world calls anxiety, stress, depression, etc. So please don't worry, it's not about diagnosing or finding a cause. It's as simple as looking at good mental health on one end of the scale, poor mental health on the other end of the scale. Very important that you don't use medical language such as "you seem depressed," because that's not what we're not trained to do that. Try to not make it about you, but be open to sharing your experiences. So I've had a really good example of this lately with a client who actually did go to her manager to say, "I'm really struggling." And he spent the next 20 minutes talking about that he was really struggling as well, and that he tried counselling through the company, but it wasn't very good, so she could maybe try that. So, she came away not feeling listened to, not feeling heard. What's the point? Why did I bother saying anything? So whilst it's important to say, I can understand how you feel, I feel quite overwhelmed at the moment, and this is what I've done to go and help myself. It's not, we don't make it about ourselves. Reassure them it is private and confidential, whilst being mindful of what they are telling you. So of course we do have to do a little bit of a risk assessment, and if we do think that they are at risk of maybe, ending their life, then of course we need to have a conversation with them about that, and we need to get them help. but it is about listening to what they're saying, coming up with an action plan, which I'm going to talk through next with you, and just being there to support. That's all as simple as it is. So if we look at the next slide, please. And it's very much about using language that suits you both. So here are just some statements. Now you might read these and think, no, I can't. That doesn't fit well for me. I can't really think that I would say that. So you put it in whatever language you and your workplace is comfortable with. So it's as simple as saying something like, I noticed that you have been a little bit withdrawn recently and wondered how you are, and then just letting them speak. I'm going to address later what happens if they don't speak, so I'm going to come to that. How are you feeling? You seem a little down recently. You seem a little angry recently. You seem a little frustrated recently. Put in the appropriate word. You seem to be overwhelmed. Is there anything I or we can do to help? Now, as a manager, you might be sat there thinking, what a jerk, I'm overwhelmed. Why, Well, if you're overwhelmed, then you need to be going and having a conversation with your boss, to be talking to them about what your boss can do to relieve your mental health challenges. And if you're the boss, then, you go and have a conversation with somebody, privately via the NHS, and talk about why you feel overwhelmed. Yesterday in the meeting, I sensed you were unhappy and I wondered if we could talk about it. How powerful is that? You're being strong enough and courageous enough to actually go down this rabbit hole. Yes, you might get something spoken back to you that doesn't really, fill you with joy and excitement, but we need to know this stuff. We need to know why our staff are not happy, because if they're not happy, they're probably not productive. And even they may be sabotaging your business, which I've had experience of before, where staff are so frustrated, so resentful about the way that they're being managed or the company policies, that they actually, whether it be consciously or unconsciously, start to sabotage the success of the business. So part of my role is to look at the demands being placed upon you at work, and I wondered if you'd like to give me some feedback. Again, another question that takes real courage, because we might get somebody coming back saying, yeah, I think you're the most critical and controlling boss that I've ever worked with, and I've been looking for another job for the last year. It takes courage to ask for feedback, and a manager, if we get that feedback, may need some help in dealing with that feedback. But how wonderful to get that feedback, because then we know that there's something that we need to change, perhaps about our way that we manage. Or it might be that thing of perception is reality. So they may be taking it as critical and controlling, where actually you may just be being assertive and they're not used to somebody being assertive. So that's why conversations like that and having examples given and, well, what did you feel when I said that? And how would you have preferred me to say that? And having these open and honest dialogues is so important. We don't seem to have laughed much recently. How are you feeling about work at the moment? So again, put these into your language of what you'd feel comfortable with, and please don't be afraid of what you get back. So let's have a look at the next slide. So once they open up, please keep calm. Remember, you're not a counsellor. And again, you might want to just jot a couple of these questions down. Okay, so how long have you been feeling that way? Have you spoke to anyone else about it? How may your work be negatively affecting this situation? How may your work be positively affecting this situation? What would you like to happen going forward short term? So when you're asking the question, how long have you been feeling this way? It's not about trying to find a trigger or a reason or, well, what must have happened? Again, it's just about creating that space to allow the individual to, to be able to explore it themselves and to be able to go, oh, that's a really good question. Well, actually, it was when you increased our hours from, daytime working to, split shift working or whatever. Because what that meant was I couldn't pick my little boy up from school, and that's really upset me. So, it's not about finding a trigger, it's just about getting some more information to understand about it. I will give you a template later on that will will give you these questions in a more logical order, but this is just to, you know, help you sort of like get more intel, more understanding from the individual about what's going on for them. Okay, let's go forward, please. So this is a template for having effective conversations. If we were doing this face to face, you'd have a workbook and there would be, you know, space in the workbook to answer these questions. But due to us being online, you know, you can still get a copy of these slides and you can still then make your own document up, a Word document, or you can put it into your HR policy or whatever. But for me, this would sit as part of your mental health policy, in that, you know, you might conduct this once every 3 months with your staff members. So first of all, we would want to be asking, okay, well, what helps you have good mental health at work? And I've just put in brackets there, stay stress-free, because that for me is about what good mental health is. But you as an organisation may have a definition of what good mental health is. So when we talked before about maybe setting up a forum or a community or somebody to sort of like lead on a project about mental health, that might be one of their tasks, is to get a workplace understanding of what good mental health is. You know, and it might come up with, you know, being content, being happy, being at peace or whatever. For me, good mental health is I'm stress-free. I'm not getting stressed about stuff. I'm dealing with everything on my plate with joy, you know, etc. So what helps you have good mental health at work? So an example of answers that we may get from this might be when I'm left to do my job on my own, or when I get regular feedback from my boss, or being able to dictate my own working hours, etc. So this is about letting the employee come up with the answers. So what you may like to do is give them this set of questions, maybe give them a week to be able to think about it, come up with their answers, and then have the meeting after a week, for example, or 3 days or 2 weeks. Because if you're asking somebody these questions and they're a bit new to this whole mental health arena, then they may struggle a little bit to come up with the answers. So it's best to give them a break before you ask them the questions, if you like. Okay, so what can we do as an organisation, whether that's starting to do or continue to do, to support you in having good mental health at work? So what can we do? And this is the brilliant thing, that if you start asking your employees these questions, they'll come up with really good answers, because remember, perception is reality. So they may come up with something that you think, well, don't we do that already? And you might be confused, but actually perception is reality. They may not realize that you're doing that, but you may think that you are doing that. And that's just where great communication helps. Now, number 3, what can you do to support yourself in having good mental health at home and work? So can you see, we're going to, by number 2, we're asking, what can we do? We're going to take responsibility in this, but what can you actually do to help yourself have good mental health? Number 4, how will I know if you have poor mental health, i.e. if you are getting stressed, including any early warning signs? So I've been working with a client lately in that she's recognizing what she needs to tell her manager about what she's not happy with that puts stress on her. So, you know, that's so empowering that she can then go back into the workplace and say, okay, you know, we've been having some struggles. What I've realized is these are my early warning signs. And if these start happening, if my red light starts coming on, we need to have a conversation about the way that I'm being managed, or the way that you're putting too many demands on me. So how will I know if you have poor mental health, including any early warning signs? Number 5, what support can we put in place when you start to struggle with poor mental health? So again, you're asking the employee that question. You're not coming up with the answers. You're asking the employee. Now, during the meeting, they might say to number 5, actually, nothing. I'm okay. I'm going to manage it myself. As long as you document this conversation, and you would do, because you would have asked them to have completed a template, whether you put that design that in your logo and build it into your processes, or whether it's just a simple Word document, you will have their statement basically saying, no, I'm fine, thank you for asking, but I don't need you to put anything in place. So, I hate to say it, but even from a protection mechanism, you've shown that you've offered support. So under the health and safety executive, you've offered support, yet they're saying, actually, I'm fine. So tick, you have done, your job responsibility, your duty of care under managing these people. So what helps you have good mental health, stay stress-free? What can we do to make sure that continues? What can you do to support yourself? How will I know if you're starting to get stressed or poor mental health? And what support can we put in place when you start to struggle? So if we go forward to the next remaining questions. Okay, so then we go into the action side of things. So again, what do you need from me, the organisation, or your colleagues going forward? How empowering to ask that to your employee. What do you need from me? Sometimes when I sort of like hang out with my friends, it can be a little bit difficult because I've got sort of like my therapist head on, but then I'm a friend as well. So sometimes I will say to them, what do you need from me? Do you want my therapy head, or do you just want my friend's head, and tell you that it's all going to be fine? So, it's a really good question to ask somebody, what do you need from me right now? And again, they're going to come up with the answers. So it takes away all that pressure of you thinking of the solutions or what you need to do. So for example, if we go back to the Angela case study, what she may have said is, I just need some flexibility to be able to go and leave work at 4 o'clock to go speak to the teacher, or the child therapist, or whatever. I need to just have an extended lunch hour so that I can go and ring round care homes to see if I can find a care home, or I need permission to be able to take calls at work because I'm going to have social services ringing me. Yep, so it's let them tell you what they need that will minimize their stress either in work or at home. What 3 actions can we take right now to help you? So again, they're going to be telling you what they need right now. You're documenting it, so you're showing that you've tried to help them as much as you can. And again, I love number 8. What 3 actions can you take right now to help yourself? So David might say, do you know what? I need to book for me and my partner to go away for the weekend so that we can just have some chill out time, for the 2 of us. Or I need to go and see a grief counsellor because I can't get over the loss of my best friend, etc. Number 9. Anything else which you would like to share with me, which you feel is important for us to know? So again, another beautiful question that you're just giving them the space to, and they might come out with, well, actually, I've suffered with depression for years, but I haven't wanted to admit it. And this is how intimacy and trust builds between the employer and the employee. It's like, I feel safe enough to be able to share this information with you. Number 10, how happy are you with the outcome of this conversation? And again, just think about how empowering that is, that this employee feels listened to, feels respected. And think about that if you're a manager or a supervisor, if you were asked to fill in this template, if you like, how listened to would you feel? How respected would you feel? That, wow, my company actually gives a shit about me because they're asking about all this type of stuff. And so finally, ensure you both sign and date the meeting notes. Of course, that's showing that, you've had this conversation, you've ticked the box of, what you need to do to under health and safety executive. But please, try not to do it just from a tick in the box exercise, because your employees will be able to tell. They'll just feel that it's just, one of those things that you feel that you have to do under the, recent times, etc. Okay, move forward, please. Yeah, I've just put this slide in because it's one of my favourite slides, plagiarised off the net, of course. And what you'll see is that on the left-hand side, we've got a comfort zone, and we all operate in our comfort zone from the minute, well, sorry, not all, but it's normal behavior for a lot of people to operate in the comfort zone. So from the minute we wake up in the morning till the minute we go to bed 7 days a week, we will repeat habits, behaviors, thoughts, feelings. And the reason why we do that is because we feel safe and in control. And if you're sat there thinking, no, I don't tend to do that, then, you know, just think about when you go and do your shopping for your big food shop, as we call it up here, big food shop. You know, do you tend to get the same sort of, you know, food? I know I do, because it's just easier to think, yeah, we're going to have fajitas that night, we're going to have, you know, omelette that night, whatever. So it's very natural human behavior that we operate in our comfort zone. And so what I'm talking about now is moving out of that comfort zone and starting to talk about mental health with your employees. So what we do is we start to move into the fear zone, because it's the unknown, and that's what fear is. Fear is just simply that it's not our comfort zone, we're being pushed out of it. So you may have a lack of self-confidence, you may find excuses, you may be affected by others' opinions. So you may be, you know, HR listening to this thinking, yep, this is what we need to do. You take it to, you know, senior leadership team, and because of their fear, they may go, oh no, we're fine with that. We haven't got any staff off with stress. We're okay. Our absence management is within, you know, national numbers. We're fine. That's just their fear zone. Yeah. So what happens is, if you push through that fear zone, we move into the learning zone. So that means you're extending your comfort zone, you're starting to learn about this mental health world, you'll start to deal with the challenges and problems that might come from asking staff about mental health. But then what happens is you're acquiring new skills and you push into the growth zone. And that can be, you know, you conquer your objectives. So you reduce the amount of staff, you know, that are off with stress. You increase your engagement figures. You know, new goals get achieved. Staff start becoming more creative, more innovative. They start talking up. They start telling you really what the challenges are in the workplace. And so therefore, that's when the company, you know, starts to find its purpose and starts to really hit the objectives that it wants to achieve. One of my favorite programs that I used to watch a lot was Undercover Boss. And for those of you that have not seen it, it would be where the boss of a company would go undercover, and you know, they would get sort of like, you know, wigs put on and moustaches and coloured hair and all the rest of it, and glasses, and they would go around their workplace, you know, pretending to be this new member of staff that's, you know, just coming in to learn how to do it. And they would ask the guys on the shop floor, if you like, so what's not working with this company? What would you change? And, you know, they would come back after this 2-week process and sit in front of the board and say, oh my God, these are our issues. This is what's going on. These are our challenges. And, you know, that is the beauty of being able to ask and listen to the staff and get their feedback, because they're the one doing the job. They know what the issues are on the shop floor. So talking about mental health to your staff, you will get to know what the challenges are, what they're struggling with. Well, we can't have phone calls, and that makes it really difficult when, you know, my son's struggling with mental health, or I'm going through a divorce. How am I supposed to deal with the divorce? It's causing me stress. So this is where the company goes into a growth zone and really becomes a humanistic organisation, getting the best out of the staff, which is, you know, such a beautiful process. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's have a look at step 3 now. So we've raised awareness, we've made our staff comfortable talking about these challenges. And so what do we do now? What is it that we have to do? They've told us all the stuff that's causing them stress. What do we do? So these are ideas of what you can do. Now, these, unless there has been a disability disclosed under the Equality Act 2010, you don't have to make these reasonable adjustments. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk about the Equality Act. So these are adjustments that you can make, but you don't have to make these adjustments unless a disability has been disclosed under the Equality Act. However, what I would say is if you can make these adjustments, then please do in some way, shape or form, because it's going to relieve stress that the employee is feeling, which then makes them more productive, which then makes your bottom line figures increase. So you may be able to alter start and finish times. You may be able to offer flexible or reduction in working hours. I used to deliver a lot of material at Hull University previous to COVID, and it was amazing how many staff would actually want to either increase their hours or reduce their hours, but yet were fearful of putting that to the manager in case the manager thought that they were not committed, or that they wanted to leave because they weren't happy. So sometimes just asking the staff member, how do you feel about the hours you're working, you'd get some great intel back. May be able to alter break times, altering targets or tasks. So, if we had Angela and she bared her soul and told us everything that she had going on, and we thought, oh my God, how is this woman managing to sort of like hit her KPIs each month? It might be reasonable just to alter some of those for 3 months until she gets everything else sorted, because we don't want to give her the pressure of having to try and hit these targets whilst trying to deal with all that other personal stuff going on. I had a call the other day from a senior leader saying about a member of staff that they were struggling with, and I said, look, the fear is that if they go off sick, that's it. It's very hard to get them to come back after they've been off sick, and the doctor will just keep giving them a sick note. So let's try and help them now to prevent them from going off sick, because then you've got a whole different issue that you've got to manage. So sometimes it's worth being, human, if you like, and just saying, actually, we can afford to pause the business needs on this for this person for these very reasons. And let's help her get back on form so that then we can put her target back and potentially maybe increase the target when she's operating at full speed. So it may be reallocation of duties. So I know when I was going through a very challenging divorce, if I'd been at work, I would have wanted a reallocation of duties, because talking to customers when I was just about to burst into tears every day was not a good way to be. So it would have been good to say, well, I'll tell you what, let's put you on admin for 2 months and keep you away from the customers, and let's empower another member of staff to get used to talking to customers. And it's a win-win situation. Nice bit of succession planning there. It may be introduce a buddy system. Working from home, we've got to sort of like laugh at that now, haven't we? Seeing as most people seem to be doing that and enjoying it, and it's helping a lot of people. Working from another location, flexibility with appointments, such as the Angela scenario. Offering training and support, coaching, or even a medical professional, giving them time out, and even just having something like the safe space zone. When the COVID thing first happened, I saw on Facebook that a lot of hospitals had a room that was sort of like called the wobble room or whatever, which basically meant that if the nurses were having a wobble, they could just go into this room and have a good cry and come back out, which I thought wow, great. It's giving that person the space to be vulnerable, and it's okay to have a wobble. So those adjustments, I would strongly recommend you try and look at. Let's look at when you have to give those adjustments. So if we move forward, please. So reasonable adjustments. So employers must make reasonable adjustments to make sure workers with disabilities or physical or mental health conditions aren't substantially disadvantaged when doing their jobs. So under the Equality Act, somebody is classed as a disability if they have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on their ability to behave and carry out normal daily activities. So you might say, well, what does that mean, Rach? What does substantial and long-term mean? So substantial is more than minor or trivial. So it takes much longer than it usually would to complete a daily task, such as getting dressed, for example. And the long term means 12 months or more, so i.e. a breathing condition that develops as a result of a lung infection. So you might think, well, hang on a minute, how do I know if a mental impairment has become a disability, meaning I have to give these reasonable adjustments? And what I would say is, don't worry, your employee will probably have told you if they have a disability that's registered and recognised by the Equality Act. So if you have an employee that comes to you and says, oh, under the Equality Act 2010, you've got to move me to this location, what you want is you want proof, you want the evidence that has actually been acknowledged by the whoever that might be. It might be a psychiatrist, it might be a psychologist. So only qualified professionals can make that judgment. A staff member can't come to you and say, yeah, under the Equality Act, regarding disability, I've got it. It doesn't work like that. There's got to be evidence, and they've got to have been assessed by a professional. But my experience is they probably would have told you that at some point. But again, please use HR and professional expertise. That is not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is helping with mental health, not managing the process of it in the sense of if it's a disability. But there's plenty online under the mindfulemployer.not that is quite clear about this, and gov.uk talks about it as well. So that's if you have to make reasonable adjustments. But again, please consider whether as a workplace you're willing to make those adjustments as standard, and they go into your mental health policy. Okay, next slide, please. So how do I review and follow up? So it's very important to review and follow up, because what's the point of going down this rabbit hole and then not actually monitoring it and not actually checking in? So quite simply, keep notes to protect you both and monitor any actions. Obtain the agreement on accuracy. Reassure the staff member that they are valued and supported, and then set a date to follow up and stick to it. So it may be that you say to the employee after the meeting, okay, so what time frame shall we review this? 3 weeks, 4 weeks? And again, use their agreement of when they feel that they want comfortable. They might say, actually, can you check in with me next week just to see how I'm feeling? So please, please, please make sure that you do. Please make sure that you review and follow up. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, really important that, poor mental health does not equate to poor performance. With the right support, those struggling with mental health can thrive at work. And that was from a report done by Stevenson and Farmer in 2017. And that's very true. And some people might say to you, well, actually, I like coming to work because it takes my mind off what's going on at home. Well, that's called distraction, which is not always an effective mechanism. Because if we're not dealing with the stuff that's causing us to feel stressed, remember that magic rug, and we keep shoving everything underneath it, gradually we're going to trip over that magic rug because the magic has worn out. It's not taking away the issues that are causing us the stress that are affecting our mental health. But with the right support, people can understand when they're starting to wobble. It's a bit like me working for myself. I know when I'm starting to go to burnout because I don't have to report to anybody, so I've got to manage it myself. And I know now when I'm starting to go to burnout, if I've worked too many hours or if I've been, juggling too many balls. So I will take myself off for a week or whatever, and then I can feel my mental health going back up the scale to good mental health. You'd like to move the slide forward, please, Peter? Okay, so sources of support. Well, coaching is a really good way. That's what I do, is I do mental health coaching. So helping people look at where am I now and where do I need to be. And even though that I'm trained in counselling, I actually prefer coaching because it just means that I can look forward, and it's not always about digging back into our history and was I locked in a cupboard from the age of 3 to 7 and not given food, and is that why I get stressed now? So it's not actually always about having to dig up the past. It's just about providing your employees with a space to be able to go and chat to somebody that's unbiased, that's going to listen, that's trained in being able to identify what is the root cause of what's causing stress here. There's plenty of charities that you could refer to, for example, Mind, they're a really good charity. NHS support, employees can access NHS support, and they can get up to 6 sessions free if they meet the criteria. as I've said, private therapist coaching. You may have an employee assistance scheme, or you may want to look at getting an employee assistance scheme. And of course, there is your local GP, but I would give sort of like a little bit of a heads up with that, you know, the GP is trained to give a medical solution, and the medical solution is usually the tablet. There's some fantastic GPs out there that will say, right, I think you should go for counselling, or I think you should go on this course, for example. But you know, there is some GPs that do just believe that a tablet is the source of clearing anxiety, depression, mental health challenges, which is not actually the case at all. So if you need any assistance in being able to refer employees on, please get in touch with me via Humber Business Growth Hub. Humber Business Growth Hub will actually fund sessions with me if it meets certain criteria. So you could refer you know, somebody to have a chat. If you could go forward, please, Peter. Okay, and just as a sort of like heads up, you know, remember that you are an employee too. So whether you're listening to this, whether you know you're a HR manager or, you know, operations director or whatever, just ask yourself, you know, who is there to support you? It's very easy when we're in a position of power to take you know, all the monkeys off everybody's back. So, you know, the staff member comes to you, brings you their challenges, brings you their problems, and the idea is that their problems represent monkeys, and because of the role that you're in, you say, right, let me take all those monkeys off your back and let me put them on my back. And that's not the case at all. It is about empowering your staff to be able to look at how can they take responsibility to manage their mental health, but how can you as a manager take responsibility in the workplace to not increase stress and, you know, overwhelm on them. So just have a think about, you know, who's doing it for you, who's sort of like checking in with you, and how's things going for you. And if there isn't anybody, then it might be about looking privately to, you know, try and get that support from somewhere. Okay, just put the slide forward, please, Peter. Yeah, so please remember, you know, you're not some sort of God. You are not there to, you know, make it all better. Some of you will be helping employees with their mental health naturally. So please don't let your fear of saying or doing the wrong thing stop you from being human. I think sometimes we can get a little bit paranoid about, am I allowed to say that? Oh my God, what if they take that wrong? What if I end up with a tribunal? You know, what I would say is just let that human empathy, compassion, care come out. And if you come at it with that intention of, you know, what can I do to help? I think that actually is probably, you know, the best that anybody can ask for. I had to send something back to Amazon this week, and one of the questions as I was sending it back was, how can we make this better? And I thought, what a brilliant question of you know, even if we could all ask that in our day-to-day life, if somebody's struggling. You know, I had a bit of a disagreement with my son this morning. He's 15, and afterwards I thought, you know, if I just said to him, how can we make this better, Luke, it would have just, you know, took away that angst and that sort of like arguing, etc. So yeah, please don't let the fear of saying or doing the wrong thing stop you from being human. And I just want to touch on something here about what happens if your staff or your employee does not open up to you. And what I would say to that is, the reason why they're probably not going to open up to you is because they feel fearful. They're probably fearful of, what happens if I tell this person? So if you think about Angela, she could be sat there thinking, what happens if I tell you, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, about all the stuff I'm trying to deal with? You might think that I can't cope with my job. If a promotion comes up, you might think I'm not suitable for promotion. If there's any overtime that comes up, you might think I'm not suitable for that overtime. You know, so bear in mind that your staff will have fear about opening up. They may have worked somewhere else where they may have opened up, and their colleague or their manager then used it to manipulate them, or used it to embarrass them, or used it to say, oh God, can't you cope with that? Bloody hell type thing. So, you know, just bear in mind that it may take a while for employees to trust that you are going to take this seriously, that you're not going to use their vulnerability as a weapon, that you are going to give it the respect that it deserves. And again, if you have somebody that won't open up, what I would say to them is I would give them that template and I would say, okay, well, I need you to, really think about these answers. So I'm going to give you an extra few days to go back and think about these answers and ask them, what fears have you got about filling in this template? What's going on for you right now? I sense some resistance. Tell me about that. Let me get into your world. Let me be able to help you. And and if at the end of the day you can't force them to tell you something, then just document that. Ask the questions. Sarah's not willing to share the completion of this form or whatever. Or maybe think, okay, would you be happy telling somebody else that's confidential, in the sense of, can you go and talk to a private therapist or a private coach about that? So when organisations send people to me, it's very clear that what goes on in my therapy room stays in my therapy room, and I'm not going to go back and tell the boss or the person that's referred them to me about what's going on. If there's a risk to the organisation or to the individual, then we'll have a conversation about that. So, if you get an employee that really isn't able to share, then think about, right, is there an unbiased third party that I can refer it to? But in my experience, guys, the reason why employees don't share is just because of fear. It's that lack of trust. So it's about getting underneath that and saying, what can I do to help you trust me going forward? What behavior do you want to see from me, so that you feel that you can trust your mental health with me? So if I'd like to move forward to the final slide. Yep, so if you're interested in discovering the level of mental wealth in your organisation, there's a survey that I've put together, and that will just help, by answering the questions, help you evaluate how well you are doing monitoring and managing mental health in your organisation. The Business Growth Hub also offer a 40% funding available for organisations who want to implement mental health policy and procedures. So my website is rachaelalexander.com, but you can go to Humber Business Growth Hub first. Please go to Humber Business Growth Hub first and ask for information about the 40% funding available. Obviously, eligibility applies, but what we can do then is we can help implement a mental health policy and look at procedures that you can bring in. We can give you training for your managers or for your staff to be able to have these mental health conversations. We can do it in a half-day course, which we can go into it in a lot more detail. So there's plenty of support out there. There's no reason now for employers to be not prioritizing mental health. And I think we should have the final slide, please, Peter. Yes, so from these 2 hours, I've just left some 10 minutes or so for questions. Understood your roles and responsibilities regarding employee well-being. So that's being able to have the conversation, have a basic understanding about mental health and know where to signpost and support. We've defined good mental health and how to recognise poor mental health. So what we've talked about there is, if we're struggling to think logically, if we're struggling to make decisions, if we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're becoming upset easily, if we're starting to feel panicky, not sleeping, turning to alcohol or food to cope, we know that our mental health has dipped into poor. And the challenge that we've got is, if we don't do something about it, it then dips into severe mental health. And that's when you're going down your route of clinical depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and that's not a good place to be. So, if we can nip it in the bud and find out what's causing mental health challenges, then we're on the up. We're on the upward slope. Hopefully how to help your employees understand and take responsibility for their own mental health. So that's going to be in the template that we talked about. What do you need to do to make sure your mental health is up to speed? And it may be that you may need to do a little workshop with staff about what mental health is and how to look after mental health, which again you can qualify for the 40% funding on half-day workshops that I offer. You've got a template now to have effective conversations with your employees regarding mental health. Again, please don't be afraid to put that into your own language. You might want to tweak the wording with that, but it's giving you a basic template. and how to take ownership of providing optimum working conditions to promote positive mental health in your workplace. So that was the list where I just asked you to reflect on, you know, do you have regular breaks in your workplace? Do you have enough stimulation? Do you have objectives? You know, are people in high risk roles, etc. So if you can look at that as a manager and look at that list and, you know, start to explore that and ask for feedback from the perception of the staff, then you're definitely moving in the right way to promote positive mental health. So that's the actual content of the webinar over, guys. If anybody's got any questions, please put them in the chat window, and Peter will manage that process.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for that really interesting presentation there. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So start with the first one is, how do you manage a situation when an employee doesn't get on with the manager?
Oh, yes, good question. How do you manage a situation when the employee doesn't get on with the manager? Funnily enough, I've had two new clients this week, and that has been the issue in both cases, that the person who came to see me is feeling stressed because of the issues with the manager. And so, you know, there's all this talk about, oh, we just have personality conflicts, you know, we just don't vibe well together. And my answer to that is, it's about having facilitating a space to have open and honest conversations, and being able to be vulnerable enough to be able to look at, okay, what is it that is triggering me? And when I say triggering me, what I mean by that is what makes me angry, you know, what makes me frustrated, either from the manager's point of view or the employee's point of view. Now, the challenge that you've got is sometimes if a person is in authority, sometimes they may struggle to be able to do that because they're operating on the command and control model, which basically means I'm your boss and you've got to do exactly what I tell you to do. And so, you know, we can either get a mediator in to sort of like mediate so that both points of view are heard about what's frustrating you, what am I not doing that you want me to do, etc. Or we can get, you know, a senior person to come in and sort of like have the conversation around, okay, so what is it then? And it's very much about giving specific examples about, well, actually, when he checks my timesheets all the time, I feel that he doesn't trust me, and I feel as though he's, you know, checking up on me. And it's about sometimes having a third party to be able to observe in that situation and think, is this about command and control? Is this about a performance management issue? Is this about one of them is just triggering each other? So I would say it's quite difficult to do it, if you're wanting to manage it, if you're expecting the two people to manage it, it's quite difficult. Sometimes you need a third person to come in, such as a qualified mediator, so that both parties are heard. And it comes down to perception is reality. So if I've been brought up in a world that, well, I'm the manager, you've got to respect me, but then the employee has been brought up in a world of no, respect has to be earned, then you've got two belief systems there that are clashing. And often that's when you need a third party, as I would do, to come in and say, can we see that you're operating with that belief system? You've got that personal construct, but you have got that personal construct. So how are we going to meet in the middle? What is the truth of this situation? Let's look at compromise. What does compromise look like? And, you know, it is that having honest conversations.
Thank you very much. So I think I'd agree with that one, definitely. The next question we've got is, it says, would you mind telling me a bit more about the buddy system and how this does look like when it works at its best?
Yeah, totally. So, you know, I'm a big one for mentoring, for having a safe person to be able to go and just check something out. So, you know, a buddy, again, with anything like this, there's no sort of like one answer fits everything. What I would be looking at if I came into the company is, what do the employees want from that buddy system? How would they see that buddy system working? What would they expect a buddy to do? What would be the roles and the responsibilities of that buddy to do. So it's, you know, it's very easy to think as a manager or as a company owner, we've got to come up with the answers. Why do we have to do that? Actually, the employees could come up with some really good examples of, well, what I want is I want a buddy that I can, when I'm having a wobble and that I feel as though I'm not coping with my workload, I can go see this buddy and they could have a look at my workload and they could prioritize it for me, or they could coach me through it, etc. So whilst it's a really good question about what does that look like, I would say, you know, that's what your community of people in your workplace would define that and look at. How would we want this buddy system to work? But for me personally, a buddy system is just a safe person that can coach, that can mentor, that can just say, you're doing a great job, it's all right, or do you think you may be taking that a bit personally? Why don't you have a look at that? So it's that trusted person that's on our team, that's on our side, that we know we can go to. But the roles and responsibilities under that buddy system could be whatever you want as an organisation. And that's the beauty of it. It's got so much flexibility to be able to work for the individual and the company. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Another question I've got is, there are certain jobs that are naturally stressful and would impact on mental health, e.g. lawyers. How would you suggest managing employees that work in such jobs that are naturally stressful?
Yeah, it's interesting because law firms is when COVID is over, one of the firms that I'm probably going to target, because to me, we need to look at the staff that are revenue generating, such as lawyers, such as solicitors. Because if they're not on the game, then they're not, you know, bringing in the revenue for the company. So what I would be looking at if I went in to help lawyers manage the mental health is I would be looking at what can they do to manage their mental health mentally, emotionally, physically and spiritually. So I would be breaking it down and saying, what does it look like? So if I'm managing my mental health spiritually, does that mean that I am going to go to yoga, or I'm going to do Tai Chi, or I'm going to learn to meditate, or I'm going to learn to listen to positive affirmations, etc. So for me, it's about giving people in stressful jobs like that if you like, a toolkit, a way of being able to stop the mental health from deteriorating into poor mental health. And I think this is the brilliant thing about having awareness of mental health. It's about looking at what can I do. So if I'm getting in from work and I know that I'm going to have my tea and then open up my laptop because I know that I'm going to have another 25 emails that I've got to answer, and I'm going to be working till 11 o'clock at night. That's my responsibility to manage, in that I've got to understand that that's not good for my mental health. So you might say, yeah, but if I don't do them, I'm not going to hit my targets. My clients are going to be disgruntled. I'm not going to get, pay rise or whatever. And it's that thing, Peter, of looking at, but what's important to me? Is my mental health important, or is my, is my fear of not having a conversation with my boss and saying, you're expecting too much of me? And I find that with a lot of my clients, that's what it comes down to. They're not pushing back. They're not saying that you're expecting too much of me. There's no way I can be responsible for all that and reach the deadlines and hit the targets that you want. So we're going to have a conversation here. And I learned this lesson when I was 21, in that I went to work. I used to work in a travel agency, and then I went to work in a bank. And so in a travel agency, I was used to having a lunch hour. It was just what you did. I went to work in this bank, and it was like this sort of like theme that you just worked through your lunch hour. You basically ran upstairs, threw a sandwich down your neck, and had a drink of water and run back downstairs and got on with it. And I noticed that everybody was doing it. And after a few weeks, I just thought, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing that? What it means is there's too much work for us all to do if we're not having lunch hours. So, I've always been a bit of a rebel. And I just thought, I said, look, to the manager, I said, look, I need to have a lunch hour, because otherwise I don't perform effectively in the afternoon. And she was like, oh, well, we don't really have lunch hours here. I said, well, I'm going to. And so I started to have lunch hours. And within sort of like a week, every single member of staff was having a lunch hour, including the manager. So what it should, and we still got our work done by like 5 o'clock. So sometimes you do have to push back, and we've got to get over our fears of disapproval. I'm not going to be seen as effective. No, but what you will be doing is saying, I value myself enough to prioritize my mental health, and that's what's important to me. And if you're going to judge me for not reading my emails at 7 o'clock on a night, then I've got to question, do I want to work for a workforce that is making me do that or is expecting me to do that? Because that's not work-life balance. And I personally would be going and trying to find a workplace that is looking at, yeah, we prioritize mental health here. No, we wouldn't expect you to do that. So, you know, it's about giving the autonomy back to the individual in high pressure jobs to be able to take responsibility to look after their own mental health and not expect the workplace to do it. Because we're just in that world, aren't we, of like, I'll keep giving you it until you do it. I'll keep giving you it until you push back. And it's about learning to manage up and know when to push back.
Yeah, definitely on that one. I totally agree with you on that. On that one, you need to make sort of time for yourself a lot of the time. Definitely 100% on that one. I think that's all the questions we've got that's come through. So it just leaves me to thank you for attending, and thank you very much, Rachel, for such an informative session today and answering those questions. As we said, if you're looking for any further support, please do contact the Humber Growth Hub. And if you're looking for any one-to-one support going on past this, contact the Humber Growth Hub, who will be able to assist you there. So, as I said, thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you very much for attending. Hopefully you found it as informative as me. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And hopefully next time I'll be on camera and get my computer sorted.
Thank you very much.